Area 51, a top-secret underground Air Force base sitting smack in the middle of the Nevada desert, way out in the middle of nowhere. It's been around since the Cold War, but get this, the CIA didn't officially admit it even existed until 2013, and the public, they're convinced that's where you'll find alien tech, maybe even the aliens themselves. So is any of it true? Well, UFO hunters and conspiracy folks want answers so badly, they actually tried to storm the place a few years back. I know that sounds insane, but stay with me. Let's break this whole thing down. But first, the facts. Area 51 really does sit inside this massive Air Force training range called Nellis, owned by the US Air Force. The base is only about 8 miles from Las Vegas, but the range itself, it's enormous. We're talking close to 7,000 square miles. To put that in perspective, that's bigger than the entire state of Connecticut. And out of those 7,000 square miles, about 5,000 of them are restricted airspace, no civilian planes allowed anywhere near it. The Nellis website actually brags about it being the largest military maneuver space on the planet. Which makes sense, right? The desert's a real convenient place to drop bombs for training, since there's nothing out there. But UFO researchers, they're sure something else is going on. I mean, where else would you stash flying saucer wreckage if not in the middle of empty Nevada? The story of the base kicks off in 1954. That's when President Eisenhower gave the order to find a spot to test new aircraft, somewhere far from prying eyes and a long way from Soviet spies. The folks in charge picked an area near Groom Lake, Nevada. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Before the war, that land actually belonged to a local family, small-town ranchers, salt of the earth. And there's a wild little side story there. Turns out their property had deposits of silver, lead, and even a little bit of gold. So when the government rolled in and offered $5 million for the place, the owners dug their heels in and demanded $40 million. In the end, Uncle Sam just took it, eminent domain. They paid the family $1 million and called it a day. For a while, the land that would become Area 51 was just a regular old airbase. Well, kinda regular. They serviced the planes that flew out for atomic bomb tests. Then somebody got a bright idea. This secret little spot would be perfect for testing high-tech spy planes. This is where they tested the famous U-2 spy plane. The U-2 was built by Lockheed Martin. The whole point of it was to fly far, fly higher than any radar could see, and haul a ton of camera gear so it could photograph classified Soviet sites from above. That's the same plane Gary Powers was flying when the Soviets shot him down over Sverdlovsk. He was later swapped for Soviet spy Rudolf Abel, one of the most famous prisoner exchanges in Cold War history. Bottom line, spy planes were a huge strategic deal. The secrecy around the U-2 testing was so insane that according to one version of the story, they actually shipped the plane to Area 51 in pieces, broken down so that if any spies caught a peek, they wouldn't even know what they were looking at. They put it back together once it got there. They later tested the Lockheed SR-71 there too, and a bunch of other aircraft like it. And right around the same time, the first reports of strange objects in the sky started rolling in. In 1959, a newspaper up in Reno, that's the city north of Area 51, ran a story saying locals kept spotting this bright green object in the sky, flying way faster than any plane, and on this weird zigzag path. And how did the CIA respond to all that? Oh, they loved it. They encouraged the rumors every chance they got. Heck, they might have even started some of them, because now, any sighting of strange aircraft could just be written off as UFO nuts with overactive imaginations. And here's the kicker. Throughout the entire Cold War, they were hauling captured Soviet aircraft out to Area 51 for study and testing. For example, in 1968 they got their hands on 2 MiG-17s. The Syrian pilots flying them got lost during a training run and accidentally landed in Israel. And Israel handed those planes right over to the United States. This was a big deal. The arms race was on, and spies from every country were hunting for intel on enemy aircraft. The design, the specs, the weak points. The place was about as classified as it gets, and the only way you were really gonna see it was from space, which almost happened back in '74. The crew of the Skylab space station accidentally photographed an area right next to Groom Lake, and after that, NASA and the CIA got into this long, heated back and forth over what to do. Thing is, There was nothing to be done. The photo got published right alongside all the other mission images in the official report. Area 51 was so secret that NASA didn't even know it was secret, and the classification was so high, the CIA guys couldn't even explain to the astronauts why they weren't supposed to photograph that area. Everybody finally calmed down once they realized, hey, the Soviets have satellites too. So worrying about it now? A little late, folks. During the Cold War, UFO researchers weren't accusing the government of hiding aliens at Area 51 yet, for one simple reason. They didn't even know the place existed. That all changed in 1989. A Las Vegas TV station, KLAS-TV, aired an interview with a guy named Bob Lazar, a physicist who claimed he'd worked at a facility called S4, located out on the test range. Lazar said he'd been transferred there from a lab in Los Alamos. That's the Nuclear Weapons Research Center. According to Lazar, at his new gig he was running one of the departments, and he told viewers, straight-faced, that his job was to study alien technology and figure out how to use it for the US military. Now you can imagine, viewers were absolutely losing their minds. The interview was set up by John Lear, the son of aviation tycoon Bill Lear, the guy who founded Learjet. John Lear was a pilot himself, and from 1967 to 1980 he flew missions for the CIA, including in Vietnam. In 1987, on one of those early internet forums, he posted that the US government had been working with aliens for years and was even producing Hollywood movies like Close Encounters of the Third Kind and E.T. So now this so-called secret scientist, Bob Lazar, pushed forward by Lear, tells the residents and tourists of Las Vegas that Area 51 has this whole complex out there, part of it buried underground. They're taking apart alien spacecraft, they're building devices based on alien tech, and they're test flying them. But Lazar didn't stop there. He had a real specific anti-war message. He insisted that the alien technology, if it were shared, could literally build paradise on Earth for everyone. But the US military, they weren't about to share. They were keeping it locked away for their own war games. Among the things he mentioned was an engine supposedly capable of bending space itself that ran on element 115. Now here's the wild part. At that point, element 115 hadn't even been discovered yet. It wasn't synthesized until 2003. By the way, it was created at the Joint Institute for Nuclear Research in Dubna, and they named it Moscovium. How many flying saucers were there at Area 51, according to Lazar? 9 of them, all of them small, built for those classic short grey aliens. Lazar even claimed he once saw guys in lab coats actually talking to one of the aliens. The staff supposedly nicknamed them the Kids because they were so short. And the aliens whose tech they were studying out there, they came from a star system called Zeta Reticuli. That name was already very familiar to UFO researchers long before Bob Lazar came along. Zeta Reticuli is tied to one of the most famous alien abduction cases in history. In 1961, a married couple, the Hills, went to specialists. They claimed they'd been taken aboard a flying saucer by these creatures in black jumpsuits. After the encounter, the couple had patches of missing memory, so both of them underwent regression hypnosis. And under hypnosis, the Hills described the trip in detail, including a star map the aliens had shown them. Now, since both of them were just regular Americans, couldn't even really point out where our own sun was on a map, they could only sketch the rough outline of what they'd seen. But later, an amateur astronomer figured out it matched the description of the Zeta Reticuli system, and later studies showed there really are planets there that could, in theory, support life. Zeta Reticuli also rings a bell for sci-fi fans. That's where the Alien movie franchise takes place. Now, Bob Lazar's bombshell interview started getting picked apart almost immediately. First off, there's no real evidence he ever worked at Los Alamos, and the universities he claimed to have attended. They had no record of him either. In 1990, Lazar was arrested on charges related to running a prostitution ring, and in 2006, he was investigated again, this time for transporting illegal chemicals, most likely precursors for drug manufacturing. But the cat was out of the bag. From that point on, Area 51 has had a steady, obsessive grip on UFO hunters and conspiracy theorists, and it's spawned a whole pile of myths. Some folks believe the Illuminati hold their secret meetings there. Others say that's where alien government cooperation deals get hashed out, or that they're developing weather weapons inside. There's even a theory about a secret runway out there, a Cheshire Cat airstrip, that supposedly only appears when you wet it down with water and disappears like the cat's smile when it dries up. Some so-called experts insist the US government runs experiments out there. Experiments bending space and time. Area 51's been name-dropped in pop culture so many times, more often even than the famous Roswell incident. You know the one. Urban legend says that back in '47, a flying saucer crashed in New Mexico. Around Area 51, well, not inside, but right up to the perimeter, a whole UFO tourism industry has sprung up. Themed motels, museums, alien-themed diners, they host an annual UFO convention out there, and they run tours for people who want to spot UFOs themselves. In 2011, journalist Annie Jacobson put out a book called Area 51, an uncensored history of America's top-secret military base. The book was supposedly built from interviews with low-level Area 51 personnel. One of them, anonymous of course, claimed that the alien saucer being kept at Area 51 wasn't actually alien at all. According to him, it was part of a crazy conspiracy between Joseph Mengele, the Nazi pilot brothers Horton, and Joseph Stalin, designed to spread panic across America in the 1940s. The story goes that Mengele ran experiments on homeless teenagers, stretching their skulls so they'd look like aliens. Then they'd stick those kids in Nazi flying saucers and send them out to terrify Americans. Why Stalin's involved, nobody really explains. But according to one version, one of those saucers crashed in Roswell in 1947. 5 years after that book came out, Annie Jacobson actually became a Pulitzer Prize finalist, though for a different piece of work. In 2005, the UFO community decided to get clever and use American law itself to crack the case. Under the Freedom of Information Act, any US citizen can demand the release of government documents. The whole process dragged on until 2013, when the government finally declassified everything I just laid out for you, the spy plane testing, all of it. But did that satisfy the UFO crowd? Of course not. In their version, the government just dumped a bunch of old, irrelevant info to cover up the real secrets, meaning the saucers and the aliens. And weird stuff keeps showing up at Area 51. One of the latest, the so-called camo dudes. Here's the thing. Area 51 isn't guarded by police, not the military, not the Marines, not even the Men in Black. It's some other deal. These unmarked, dead serious, heavily armed guys. Camo dudes is the nickname UFO hunters slapped on them, because nobody can describe them any better than that. They actually do wear camouflage, and they roll around in plain white pickups with no markings, no insignia, nothing. It's some kind of mystery paramilitary force. To this day, nobody's been able to figure out which agency they answer to. And you can't ask them, because instead of talking, they pull their weapons. Look, the mystery of Area 51 has driven people absolutely crazy. In 2019, a guy on a popular social media platform, Matty Roberts, actually started a group to bring like-minded folks together and end the secret once and for all. The plan was simple. Get every UFO hunter and conspiracy theorist together and storm Area 51. Roberts was your classic 21-year-old anime fan still living with his parents. The group started out as one of his jokes, poking fun at the conspiracy crowd and the UFO believers who'd been waiting decades for Area 51 to spill its secrets. Storm Area 51. They can't stop all of us. That was the name of the group. The description said, meet at the chain-link fence around Area 51 on September 20th, 2019. If we run fast, like Naruto, we can outrun their bullets and get a look at the aliens. That's an actual quote from Roberts. The group went viral. The next day, 1 million people had marked themselves as going. By the time the date arrived, that number was up to 3 million. The military was forced to put out a public warning about the consequences of trying to storm the base. Roberts tried to cash in on his viral joke by turning the whole thing into a music festival instead of a raid, but he couldn't pull it together. On the day of the event, 150 people actually showed up at the main gate of Area 51. Some of them armed, but they took one look around and decided, yeah, We're way too few of us to storm a US military installation.